So, are you a comic book fan who prefers to read your comics digitally? Are you eager to read new content and are upset because the pandemic is keeping any new comics from coming out, including digitally? Well, legendary comic book writer and artist Erik Larsen has words for you. Oh, good grief. Alright, so, at the time of doing this video, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. Comic book stores are unable to open their doors to customers. Some are doing mail order. Diamond Distribution is still not sending out comics, although they have talked about maybe in about a month starting to send comics out again. DC is trying to find a way to get comic book stores by the end of April or beginning of May, regardless of Diamond. So it's still a conundrum, what if the future of comics is and how badly this whole thing is going to hurt it. A lot of people have been going online, both professionals and just fans saying what they think should be done to save the industry. Erik Larsen went on to Twitter to talk about some of these ideas and offer a rebuttal to several of them. One of the suggestions he thought was not a good idea was the recommendation that publishers continue to release comics digitally while not releasing them in stores. Now, right now, no comics are being released digitally or in stores, but obviously, comic books are drawn months in advance of their actual release. So there are several months worth of comics that could, today, as I'm doing this video, be posted on Comixology if the publishers wanted to. But universally, aside from maybe a couple of small independents, all the publishers have agreed that they want to basically sync up with print, meaning that if there's not print books out, they don't want to put comic books out digitally. Naturally, if you're just a fan of digital comics, if you don't really care about print comics, then this must be pretty frustrating to you. I mean, here you are in the middle of a pandemic, probably stuck with a lot of free time, can't go out and see friends or do whatever, so you're thinking, hey, great, time to read more digital comics, but all the new books are not out. I mean, talk about irony there. So it's understandable that many of those fans would clamor for the comics to be released digitally anyway. And if you're one of those fans, here's what Erik Larsen, the creator of Savage Dragon, has to say to you. I've heard a few people suggest that Marvel, DC, and Image just continue putting out comics digitally while we're all stuck at home. They argue that not doing that may cause readers to break their reading habits and give up on comics altogether. This is not a good idea. Okay, for my part, I have no problem with this tweet whatsoever. He's offering an opinion, and he is correct that there are some comic book fans, and probably many of them fans of digital comics, that are making that argument. Okay, so no problem at all with this post. Then he follows that up by saying this. First, for digital readers, there's nearly 100 years worth of content. If you're telling me that you've read all that material and that you crave more or you'll never buy another comic book again, you're kidding yourself. There is no way you've read it all. Okay, this really bothers me. I have two problems with this. I will say my main problem up front is the tone. He's talking to probably customers out there, and why be condescending to your customer base? Sure, he's had a long career already. He doesn't really need your dollars anymore, but if nothing else but for good tact, for all the people who helped him get there by buying his comics all this year, you'd think he would have a little more common courtesy than to cop such an attitude in a rebuttal. The other thing that bothers me is it's just not a good argument. It shows a lack of understanding of the comic book market as a consumer product. People keep buying comics regularly because they want new content. Back issues have always been there, and yes, people do buy back issues. They buy it digitally and they buy them physically. And I'm not talking in this case about the collectability. Obviously, you can't do that with digital. I'm talking about the fact that there are people who just want to read some older stories, whether they're stories from a couple of years ago or 20 years ago or all the way back to Action Comics #1. But what keeps people engaged is the constant new content. The fact that every week they can look forward to getting something new. There is an innate part of human nature that is more excited about new than something that is not new. I mean, sure, there's lots of comic books and stories out there that they may not have read. That doesn't mean they don't know about them. If it's an old story, they may already know the gist of the plot. If nothing else, they know where the story goes in the sense that they've already seen where the character develops and where the villains go on and do stuff next. Or they've seen where Marvel Comics or DC Comics, the universe itself has been shaped by things like Secret Wars or Crisis Infinite Earth, even if they've not read them. So there's a certain excitement factor that's already gone. Now, yes, Erik is correct that if you simply want to read a story that you personally have not read before, there are so many out there that you're never going to get a chance to read them all unless you're some sort of superhuman speed reader. But to assume the nature of comic book readers is simply going to be to just gravitate to back issues because there's nothing else overlooks the fact that people want this newness. And It also is ignoring the fact that there are a lot of things competing with comic books out there right now. Talking about other forms of entertainment. Let's remember that people from my generation, and I'm probably maybe a little younger than Erik Larsen, but I'm close to his age. People from our generation grew up in a time where there weren't a lot of forms of entertainment that you could easily carry with you. I remember when I was in school, the Game Boy was kind of a new thing, but you didn't have really hardly any sort of mobile type device. If you were stuck somewhere waiting for a ride and you wanted something to do, well, carrying a comic book was an easy way to keep yourself preoccupied. But today, people have cell phones, they have laptops, they have portable game devices that are light years above anything that the Atari or early Nintendo could do. So if they want to be entertained and they don't have digital comic books to be entertained with, it's very easy for them just to find something else, non-comic book related, to be entertained with, and then develop a habit where that's where they go to instead of comic books. See, that's the real danger. I think it's important that publishers understand that what they're competing with is less to do with competing with each other. They are competing with other sources of entertainment and technology. If people like Marvel, if they like DC, they like Image, they'll buy all three. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's so much other stuff out there to be entertained with, it's very easy to get distracted away from comic books. In the 80s, comic books could fill a niche that you didn't get with TV and movies because you couldn't take TVs and movies with you. Today, you can carry TVs and movies on your phone. Back to Erik's main point. Now, personally, if they start putting digital comics out today, I'm not going to buy them. And that has nothing to do with showing solidarity for stores. I don't read digital comics. In my opinion, and I believe an objective argument could be made to support this, comic books is not a format that works well on a mobile device. It's really designed for print. I don't mean sequential art doesn't work well on a mobile device. I'm just talking about the comic book print format. If you want to see a format that does work well on mobile devices, go look at Webtoons. There's lots of examples there. But that's not what print comics are, and that's not what the Comixology comics are. So for me personally, if they don't want to put comics in Comixology, that's totally fine with me. Whether or not that's good for the industry, that's a different question. Now, Erik does have a good rebuttal why it's a good idea to hold off on digital, but he uses that rebuttal a couple of points later as more of an afterthought, and I don't understand why he did that. Here's what he wrote. If publishers continue to put out digital books during the shutdown, once books are being sent to stores, they're going to print all of that backlogged material, and they're not going to just continue to put out digital books that are months ahead of print comics. So we can all wait together now, or we can have a digital keep going, then have digital have a huge wait while physical stores catch up. See, now that is a good rebuttal. Now there's still room for discussing whether or not that's the right answer, but for now I'll just leave it at that because honestly I'm not really sure what the best approach is. What I do know is being condescending to fans and customers is really a bad look, and back issues are not going to save the comic book market from the crisis that faces at hand.